guys. I hope everyone is well. So, today, inshallah, I'm just going to do a quick live. It's going to be mainly a Q&A, inshallah, so as you guys come on, and if you have any questions related to Islam or Da'wah. But I wanted to sort of quickly also share some thoughts on a very interesting topic, something I've been thinking about myself recently, and something that we all experience, right, as being human beings in this world, and something we find very sort of tricky and difficult to understand and grasp. And I don't think I have it worked out to any degree, any significant degree, but I believe that I have, at least for myself, thought it through to the point where I've started to subtly experience some of its benefits, and that is the understanding between the ego and the real self. Because it's extremely significant when you think about the ego. When you talk about the ego, firstly, how do you define the ego? That's a challenge in and of itself. That's something you'll get many different definitions of the ego. What is the ego? But we'll get to that. But I think it's significant for us Muslims as well, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes throughout the Quran, and throughout Islam, this is emphasized, that we are to be sincere to Allah, that we are to seek His pleasure, that we are to do things for His sake, as opposed to doing things for, especially when it comes to religious actions and activities, doing things for other than Allah, such as for other people to attain their praise, to become significant in their eyes, to feel good about yourself, to get a bit of a ego boost, as we say, and all of these things relate to insincerity. And all of this, at the end of the day, is significant because it has a bearing on, where we end up at the end of this life. So it's important to sort of look into these things and think about these things, because a lot of times, just because we don't understand who we are, at least from the perspective of, what is the ego, what is the self, that we end up not hitting the mark, as far as, it has a direct impact when it comes to our sincerity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that fundamentally depends on knowledge of Allah. I really believe the thing that's worked for me, and I can only speak for experience on most of these things, one of the biggest factors in being sincere with Allah is fundamentally knowing Allah, having a relationship with Allah. Because how can you be sincere with someone that you don't know? How can you be true to someone or something that you don't know, that you don't love, that you don't that you don't worship? It's difficult. So that is, although it's not directly related to what I'm speaking about, but that is one of the fundamental things when it comes to sincerity. The closer you get to Allah, the more you know Him, the more you realize who He is in relation to you as a human being, and who you are in relation to Him. All of these things are factors that will really help in us trying to attain sincerity. And it's one of those evasive things. It's something that even our scholars, it's the most challenging thing. You can't ever be certain that you're sincere, but nevertheless we can do things to help us in our sincerity. So that is the fundamental thing: knowing Allah, being close to Allah, and knowing who you are. And that's what I want to go into today briefly, is knowing who you are. Not talking about purpose or meaning of life. That's secondary. That we can only make sense of once we know who we are. And when it comes to knowing who we are, there are different aspects to that. But the specific aspect I want to focus in on is this aspect of the ego in relation to the true self. Now let's try to define the ego. What is the ego? Because normally when we think about the ego, what do we think about? We think, we sort of, wa alaikum salam, by the way, to everyone joining. When we think about the ego, normally the first perception, the idea that comes to mind is, or when someone says to you, this is your ego, or you refer to someone saying, this is just ego, the thing that comes to mind is the aspect of an individual's personality which is emitting this type of bravado, I am better than him, I can outdo him, or I can outdo her, I am greater than them. Showing off, trying to impress people. These are the type of things or ideas associated with the ego. But I think that's an aspect of the ego, maybe the negative aspects of the ego, that selfish side of the ego. Because when you look at all of the, or at least I've looked at some of the literature when it comes to the ego and what is the ego and how psychologists define ego, etc., it seems like it's referring to the self as in the image, the mental image of ourselves, the identity that we create or that's created through our interaction with the world, through us identifying ourselves with other things, right? So, the ego would refer to this image, this self-image that develops through the interaction with the world generally, and identification through it. So, for example, when someone wants to know about you, or when you are introduced, what's normally introduced or told about yourself is, okay, this is so-and-so, he is a PhD, he is a master's, this brother's involved in the da'wah, he is a sheikh, this guy is a professor in biology, or it could be with possessions, this guy is a millionaire, he owns this, he did this, he set up this project, he did this charity work, or when you refer to yourself, I am British, I am, the owner or CEO of whatever company, that's the image. That's the self. I think that's what is referring to, that self-image that develops through a relationship with the world and our identification with things in the world, our association with them. But that specific aspect of the ego, which is really sort of negative, if you like, or has tendencies of negativity, is when we start to define ourselves, through these things. Like, the side of the ego that wants to sort of be better than someone else. I am better than this person. I could do this. I have this. They don't have that. And all of these things. These are where it's. This is where it becomes problematic, when we really sort of continue to express that side of ourselves, and then we start to get validation through that. That's what gives us happiness, a temporary type of happiness. When we outdo someone, when we outperform someone, when we have more money than someone, when we think we're more intelligent than someone else, that we have more knowledge than someone else. And then when people start to recognize us like that, then the ego gets inflated even more. So it's a recognition of others which also inflates the ego, that self-image, which makes you feel good in some sense. And this is what's problematic, is this aspect of the self which can be detrimental, especially to the Muslim, because it's not about us, it's not about you. And also, it's funny because what I recently read somewhere where, the ego also gets inflated not only through things that are seemingly good, or, that can inflate the ego from the perspective of where it elevates you as a person above other people, but also through difficulties and challenges in life. When you go through hardships, what is our response in those hardships? Why me? Why do I have to suffer? It's validating the self. So we're almost finding validation through associating with even the challenges and difficulties in life in a negative way. And this is the side of the self, us human beings, which is really promoted in the world that we live in today. And even all of the systems that are set up in the world are the manifestation of this aspect of the self by certain people of power who put these systems in place. And they feed the development of the ego within the individuals that live within the system, within the society. And it's not nice. It's because we have narrowed ourselves down to just this one aspect of ourselves, when we are so much more than that, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us. and the side of us that's really significant, that matters, the real self, the true self. And that is dormant. It's made dormant in the world that we live in today. It's not something that you're supposed to focus on. What is this true self? I think it predominantly refers to the aspect of a self which is known as the soul, the ruh, that Allah breathed into us. When He created Adam, He breathed into him the soul. And the soul, as we know from the Quran, has, we don't know how, but it contains the fitrah. There is the fitrah, there is this pure nature. There is the spiritual heart, the qalb, how it relates to the soul. It's a part of that whole reality, but Allah knows best how it relates. And also, an understanding of right and wrong, as Allah says in Surah Al-Shams, that He inspired the soul with an understanding of its good and its bad. And that's what essentially makes us human. That's what distinguishes us from the category of animals. Beings created from the earth, matter, biology, atoms and molecules, that our soul, our spiritual self, is what elevates the human being. And Satan couldn't recognize this. He didn't recognize this, and hence he didn't prostrate to Adam when Adam was created. Whereas all the angels did. He didn't. And this was the reason he gave as well. Well, when Allah asked him, why did you not prostrate? He said, I am better than him. I am made of this. He is made of this. So he could only see the obvious, the appearance. But he couldn't see the essence of us human beings, which is the soul, which is that part of us which has huge potential, but is completely locked away in the world that we live in today. And we're not, it's not spoken about, it's not mentioned. And putting all that aside, how are we ever going to learn how it develops? Obviously Islam teaches us all of these things, but we don't focus on these things, and that's what really matters at the end of the day. And this is what I think, as far as my understanding goes, this is what I think Iqbal, Muhammad Iqbal, Allama Iqbal, I think this is what he was referring to when he referred to the concept of the Khudi, selfhood. Some people mistranslate it as the ego, the thing that emerges, the image that emerges of the self in relation to the world, as I've said, in association with the world, defined through objects, forms. He wasn't speaking about this. He was speaking about the real self, the inner self, that the soul of the human being, that true reality that only Allah can inform us of, because it's not as apparent as the physical self is, and even as the self-image is, the ego that we have. It's hidden, but we are aware of it, because now, I don't know how this relates, because we are conscious. Now, I'm not saying the soul is consciousness. Allah knows best again. But maybe our conscious awareness, the fact that I'm speaking to you and you're consciously aware of me speaking to you, and I'm consciously aware that some of you guys are on this live stream. That consciousness, which eludes science, they can't materially pin it down. Maybe that's just an appearance or a reflection of the soul in some way. Allah knows best. But that is something significant. It is linked to the soul in some way. Again, we don't know. But knowing it's not important right now. What's important is to realize that it's there, that we have a soul, that we are more than just the material composition of our bodies. We are more than just the self-image of ourselves, our egos. There is a self which needs to be developed and purified. And all of this is linked. All of this is linked. The physical self, the ego, the soul, there is a link. They're linked in some way. And again, it's beyond me right now to sort of pin it down or to explain this any further, but it's linked. And if we can appreciate it's linked, it makes sense, therefore, when Allah tells us to become Muslim and to submit to Allah in Islam is to then act upon what Allah has told us to do. So these actions also contain changes to the physical self in a way, right? It contains actions that we need to do physically in this world. It also has a lot to say about self-image, how we identify ourselves, referring to the ego essentially, right? How we identify ourselves in this world. Who are we? As far as our characteristics are concerned, what do we do? And all of this has an impact on the soul, because we know all of this leads to the purification of the soul, which is within the physical self, or a part of the physical self. I don't even know if I'm making sense right now, to be honest, but I'm just thinking out aloud, inshallah, and hopefully sort of, you guys take something from this, and hopefully, you may be able to connect the dots in some way. But I think, to summarize what I'm trying to get at, and one of the things I think we all need to focus on, is to really explore our true selves, really get to the bottom of who we are as human beings. And it's unfortunate many Muslims don't even recognize this, although we are Muslim and we make the claim, but we haven't really discovered who we really are as human beings. When we talk about ourselves, even as Muslims, we only refer to ourselves as non-Muslims refer to themselves, on a level that non-Muslims refer to themselves, which is, I am a human being, meaning I am a physical body. I have a head, I have 2 eyes, I have 2 ears, I have a mouth, I have a nose, I have 2 arms, 2 hands, a torso, 2 legs, 2 feet, and I not only know that this is what makes me up, I know how to take care of myself, I need to eat good, I need to exercise, and I even know myself as far as how I define myself, the self-image, referring to maybe, what I've, in my way, define the ego, is, that I am so-and-so, I grew up in such and such place, I studied such and such subject, I got a master's in such and such subject, I'm a PhD, I work in this company, I'm a CEO of this, blah, 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 all of this type of stuff. Alhamdulillah, we do identify also with, I am a Muslim, but we don't explore that further, as to, okay, what does that mean? And also, how Islam tells us that there is more to us, that there is the soul that needs to be nurtured, that needs to be purified. And it's important because, look, I'll be honest, guys, just because, us guys on this side of the camera speaking to you, we may come across as people who have things figured out and that ego is not a problem, we're very sincere. None of this is true. Although we try to be as sincere as we can. But we all struggle time to time. And I have struggled with this too. Of course, everyone does. Especially when you're doing public facing things, that's when you have to really try to control yourself and not to do it for the wrong reasons, just to get an ego boost or to feel good about yourself, that look, I'm speaking to people and they're listening to me and all of this type of stuff. And it can apply to all of our lives, it could be at your workplace, it could be within your family, it could be amongst your friend circle. The ego has to be kept in check. At least that aspect of the ego which is really negative, which can really mess up your intentions and your sincerity. So yeah, it's something we need to work on, brothers and sisters, and all of the work starts with first identifying and realizing that you're more than just a physical being, you're more than just an image that's developed through your thoughts based on your experiences and your interactions with the world, which you're referring to your ego. And when we could get to that point, that's when the work can start, and that's the work we need to do, and if we can do that, brothers and sisters, honestly, when you start to really, and I'm not saying because I've experienced this, but I'm saying because we know there's been pious people within our tradition, within Islam. Take the prophets, for example, the greatest of human beings to walk this earth. When they recognize this, they realize this, and they're really focusing on developing the inner self, that soul, purifying it, and when they have it, and then the pious people, the companions and so on and so forth, they become beacons of light, and they shine so bright, they illuminate everything around them, literally. And we've probably experienced this when you've been around people, pious people, really pious people. You just feel it. You want to be in their presence, in their company. But when you're in front of someone who has an inflated ego, and it's all about themselves, there's this aversion to such a person. You don't really want to be around that person. It's not nice. So we pick up on it. People pick up on these things. And when you're around someone that's pious and someone that's developed their soul as opposed to developing the negative side of the ego, that person you want to be around. And we leech off such people. We gain so much from them. Especially people whose iman is so high. Their spiritual state is really high. we feed off that and we develop through that and we grow through this. Our iman becomes increased when we're around such people. And when we're not, when we're around the opposite, then that's how we become as well, and that's how we feel as well. So it's important to surround yourself with the right people too. And we know this is something the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, that you are on the deen of your friends, the religion of your friends, the way of your friends. So it's important to surround yourself with good people and to really start to work on yourself. And it's difficult because you're not going to learn about this from the world that you live in, and it's not something that's praised or something that's seen as something praiseworthy or something that's good. Everyone's focusing on the material side of things. Everyone's focusing on gaining as much as they can and making their physical life, the material life, as comfortable as they can. Outdoing other people, inflating the ego as much as you can. And it's difficult, but may Allah make it easy for us. And I really think this is why people like Iqbal were so powerful, because when they spoke about the self and the development of the self and how much power there is in that, and it's the source to true happiness as well, brothers and sisters, because happiness and joy is something we're all chasing in this life, and we think we're gonna get it when we have such and such thing, or when such and such problem disappears from our life. And we all have challenges, we all have trials and tribulations. We're probably experiencing many right now. We think when these things go away, that's when I'll be happy. That's when joy will enter my life, happiness will enter my life. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. True happiness and joy can only come when you are in line, when you recognize who you are and you develop that true self of yours, which is the inner self and your relationship with Allah, and the soul is being purified. That's when you're going to feel a state of joy, a sense of joy, no matter what your external world, the state of your external reality is like. Whether you have, trials and tribulations, hardships, you're always going to have an inner state of bliss. And that's what we all are aspiring towards, but we're looking for it in the wrong areas. So, what we want lies in this, and that's, what more could we want in this life? We know we're going to go through trials and tribulations and hardships, difficult experiences, pain, suffering, but what more could you want other than just to be in a state of utter peace through all of these things, and be able to deal with them to the best of your ability and just be content with that, and that's what we need to attain. Anyway, I'm rambling now, inshallah. But to conclude, and we could take some questions, inshallah, I think, this is the essence of Islam to a degree as well. It's about purifying the soul, finding your true self in relation to your creator, in relation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and moving through life in that way until you come to the end of your life, and to do the best you could do, and be satisfied with that. And that's what success is at the end of the day. Knowing your creator, worshipping him to the best of your ability, purify yourself. And that's done through Islam, and Allah's laid it all out for us. The blueprint is laid out for us. It's all there. It's just, are we going to make the effort to explore it, to internalize it, to live by it? That's the key. That's the key. Everything else, and subhanAllah, we see the ego being expressed in every field, subhanAllah. Even the dawah is full of ego. I've experienced it in my own life, when I, especially, not limited to when I used to go to Speaker's Corner, but even now, time to time, it's difficult. There's times when I do a live, and at the end of it, I just feel really down. That's the best way I can explain it. Just feel really down. And I don't understand it. I'm thinking, okay, if I, wait, hold on, I'm supposed to be doing this for a really great cause. I'm trying to do this for the sake of Allah, trying to really, do it for Islam, to help people to find their creator. Well, if that's the case, then I shouldn't be feeling like this. But then you realize that, well, you wouldn't feel like this if that's why you really did the things you did, right? So it's very important to, it's a gauge. These are gauges Allah's put within us. One way to really check if you are truly sincere and doing things for the right reason is to see how you feel when you're doing those things, or after you've done those things. Does it give you strength? Does it make you feel strong, or does it make you feel weak and down? And if it makes you feel weak and down and exhausted, well, then you know that you've already been spending a lot of time or putting in a lot of effort to do things for the wrong reason. Although you may have tried to be, at the same time, try to convince yourself you're doing it for the right reason. So, and that's why it's very important to take some time before you do whatever you do to really think things through. What is your reasons behind this? Why are you doing this? Are you doing it for your ego? Are you doing it for some sort of worldly benefit? Or are you doing it to genuinely help people and doing it for the sake of Allah? So anyway, let's do some Q&A, inshallah. Wa alaikum assalam to everyone that said salam. My screen's very small, so I'm going to see if I can... Why are youth turning away from the Deen? Truth Lover says. There's probably many reasons for this, guys. You know, there are many reasons for this. I'll just briefly list a few things that I think are the main causes for this. Number one, the environment. The environment. We live in a secular, godless environment, and that's inevitably going to have an impact on people. It's always going to be that pulling force that's pulling you away in the opposite direction. I think the other reason is a lack of, a poor understanding of the Deen. What is the Deen? Along with this, it's also just a lack of understanding of, again, what we spoke about today, who we are. You know, who are we as human beings? What is our purpose? These are the two predominant things. Yeah, I think these are the two predominant things, and everything else comes under these two things. A lack of appreciation and understanding of what the Deen is and how useful it is for you as a human being, and the environment that we're a part of. I think those are the two main things. Okay, so I have a question that eats away at me inside. I hope you can answer it, please. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says He created good and bad. Hitler was evil, but isn't because Allah created him as an evil. And then what was his fault? Okay, so this is a good question. It's a general question. Here's what we need to understand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created everything. He's created the good and He's created the evil. Everything Allah has created, okay? And the manifestations we see of this are around us. You know, there's good and there's evil in this world. However, we don't ascribe evil directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Although Allah is the creator of everything that exists. But what we have to also appreciate and understand is it all ties back to this fundamental, pivotal concept in our Deen, which is that life, Allah created, as He says in Surah Mulk, He created life and death to test which of us is best in deeds. We're going to be tested. This is a test. And tests are not supposed to be easy or comfortable, at least all the time. There is the element of hardships and trials which require a level of evil. But it's not pure evil. That's what we need to appreciate, that there is good even behind that evil and that suffering. And that's how we have to see this and understand this, you know, and there's many reasons for this, you know, that, you know, it's a test fundamentally. We're going through a test, we're going to face evil, we're going to experience evil. And Allah is seeing, how do we respond to that test? How do we respond to that evil? Because what does Allah say? To see which of us is best in action, in deeds. How are we going to respond to those trials, that evil that we face? You know, because remember, what did Allah make us? You know, He refers to the human being as a vicegerent. And He's told us that He's created the human being with a soul that has an understanding of right and wrong. He's created the human being with free choice, free will. He's created the human being with an aql and an intellect, right? To be able to determine what's right, to be able to determine what's wrong, to understand it on a fitri level, on an intellectual level. And He's given us the ability to do something about it, to act. That's what this life is all about. It's to act in this world, to do something. Good or bad is determined by what we choose to do, but is to act. So how do we now act? Instead of focusing all of our energy and intention, oh, there's evil, there's suffering, there's bad, why don't you do something about it? Because Allah's created you to do something about it in this world. That is your test. Are you going to be someone that's conscious of your creator, someone that worships their creator, therefore recognizes who they are? Because we can only truly know ourselves if we know Allah. As Allah says, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Do not be like those who forgot Allah and Allah made them forget themselves as a result. They are the ones who are the true transgressors. So once you've identified yourself and know who you are, and that is if you are a believer, someone that's recognized your creator and recognized through what he has revealed to us as well as to who we are, and you recognize you're an agent, you're a being that has free will, that has an understanding of right and wrong, that has the ability to act, then what are you going to do about that evil and that suffering? What are you going to do about the people, the Hitlers of the world, as was mentioned in that question? What are you going to do? But it's sad because even us Muslims today, we just don't recognize ourselves. We don't recognize the potential that you have and the role and responsibility that you've been given as a human, as insan, on this earth, on this planet. You know, and the youth, the younger generation, I mean, we want to run away from responsibility. We don't want nothing to do with responsibility. Put aside the responsibility of taking care of things out there in the world. We don't want to be responsible for ourselves and our own lives and our own immediate environments. We want to lose ourselves in games, video games. We want to lose ourselves in drugs, in alcohol, and all of these types of things. We run away, even as Muslims, you run away from responsibility. And Allah has put you here to be responsible. You know, and all we can do is when we get a break from gaming or when those drugs wear off is, there's so much evil, there's so much suffering. Why doesn't God do something about it? What would you want? Allah has given you the ability. This is your test. Allah has put you here and set up the world around you for a specific reason. You do something about it. You do something about it. You know, and it's sad, brothers and sisters. Wallahi, you see atheists, people that hate God, don't believe in God, believe this whole world is just one big accident. These people are actually doing something about it. They are actually doing something about it. They set up organizations. They do charity work. They feed the homeless. They do X. They do Y. They're driven. They understand responsibility. I mentioned this in a previous video. Existentialist philosophers of the 18th and 19th centuries. You know, people who didn't believe, most existentialists were atheists. They didn't believe in God. They believed that we are born without purpose. We have no purpose. Yet they understood the importance of responsibility. But we don't, you know, and responsibility entails that we get up and we do something for ourselves, sort ourselves out, sort out the immediate things around us, and then try to sort the world out to the best of our ability with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have Allah. They don't have Allah, yet they are acting and doing what they can. They are working off their nature. We are running away from our nature. You know, and this is scary. It's really, really scary, subhanAllah. We feel inferior. You know, we feel, especially Muslims in certain parts of the world, we have these inferiority complexes of people, of just other limited human beings, just because they may have colonized us at a certain point in history. You know? And we have such an inferiority complex that we want to follow them in every way. You know, they may have left the lands that they conquered, but we don't want them to leave our hearts. We want to still follow them. They are teachers still. It's messed up. It's all upside down. Until we don't figure this out, we don't recognize what we are as human beings, who we are, who our creator is, why he created us, what our responsibility is on this earth, why he referred to us as an vicegerent. I mean, I feel ashamed even thinking about it, that Allah created me and you, all of us, you know, but I can speak for myself, and he referred to us as a vicegerent. He made us a human being with a soul that he breathed into us. He made us conscious. He made us rational. He gave us free will. What other thing on the face of this, in this world or in this existence, you know, well, maybe a couple of other beings, but have free will in this material world, let's just say, putting aside the jinn. Us. So it comes with responsibility. Free will plus the ability to understand good and bad and the difference between the two, and the ability to act comes with a responsibility. But we have to realize this. Allah is commissioning you and me. You know, these atheists, they only have themselves to commission themselves, tell themselves they have to do good and act and be good and help the world and solve the problems of the world. Allah is telling us, our creator, he's spelling it out for us. It's not even a case of, Is this right or wrong? This is coming from Allah is telling us to act, to be good, to do good, but we're not doing it. So anyway, I think that hopefully addresses that point, bro, for you. Maybe seeing yes. The ego is a product of the influence from the outside, absolutely. What do you think about Sir Sayyid Ahmed Khan? I haven't looked into Sir Sayyid Ahmed Khan's works, so I have no idea. Some of these questions are going to miss because I don't think they're related. Oh, the potentials. Okay. Is the ego a part of your nafs? It's not. I can't answer this straightforward because I haven't looked into this enough. But what I can tell you is that the word nafs in the Quran, especially when the use of the word nafs in the Quran, there are several different uses of the word nafs. When the nafs is referring to the self, possibly that also is referring to the ego. But I don't think I can right now make any direct correlations between the two. But possibly, yeah, it's referring to the self-image that we create of ourselves in association and through through our relationship with the things around us. Is the character ego? If we have defined, if you take my definition or my understanding of ego, which is that it's the self-image, the whole image of the self that's developed through your association and your relationship with the things in the world around you, through experience, then your character, you can say, to a great degree is influenced by your ego, or is developed by your ego. Because what is your character? I mean, if we're referring to the character and we're referring to, for example, traits that we have which make up our character. So some people are, say, shy, some are outspoken, some people are more naturally nervous, some people are brave, some people are more afraid, if you like. I don't know if that's the correct word I want to use, but some people are kind, generous, some people are selfish. If we're referring to characteristics or these things making up the character, then you have to realize that our characters develop through our experiences of the world and our life. Much of it's childhood experiences, that shape who we become. So I would say the character there is a association or relationship between the ego and the character. So there's definitely an association there. And this is why, it's your character, you can change your characteristics. It's difficult, it's not easy, especially after a certain age. But there is a malleability that you can improve your character. And this is definitely you can improve your character. This is what Islam encourages you to do. Encourages you to develop a beautiful character. I think there is a link. Maybe they're the same thing, but they're elements of the ego, I think. And there is the element of the ego which we normally recognize, which is this negative element, this boasting, pride, showing off, undermining other people, etc. But that's not the whole of the ego, this self-image that we have. And that's linked obviously with our characteristics as well. Okay, let's see. Why is following nafs shirk? So let's rephrase that. Why is worshipping the self, if we're referring to the nafs in the context of the self, us, ourselves, shirk? Because you're worshipping other than Allah. And Allah does say in the Quran that, have you not seen the one who's taken his desires as Lord? So he worships his own desires. And again, desires, these things are so complicated, brothers and sisters. So I'm trying to be very careful with what I say, just because I don't want to give you the wrong idea. Desires themselves, I mean, how do you have your base desires, which are, your desire to eat, to want to drink, to rest, to procreate. These are sort of your base desires as human beings, your physical desires. But then you have other desires, your second degree of desires, which is to become powerful, to have a lot of money, to outdo other people. And these, I think at least these desires are directly linked to your ego, the self-image of yourself, because they help to inflate it and they stem from it. So what was the question about? So following yourself, or you're worshipping yourself, being shirk, is essentially because if your Lord becomes your own self and your own desires, as Allah says, well then, you're not worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's another idol. Instead of worshipping a stone or some other ideology or another thing or another god, you're worshipping yourself. And many people do that today. And that's why it's shirk. Because you have to remember, what is shirk? Shirk is when you associate partners with Allah. This can be in associating partners with Allah from the perspective of lordship, that there are other creators aside from Allah. This could be, shirk could also be from the perspective of associating partners with Allah in regards to His names and attributes. And it could be associating partners with Allah from the perspective of worship, that you're worshipping other beings aside or alongside Allah. All of this is shirk. And you can apply these aspects of associating beings and things with Allah to many different things, to idols, to statues, to ideologies, to systems, to other people, to yourself, etc. So shirk is the worst thing any human being can do, to be honest. Okay, let's see. Okay, so there's mashallah some discussions going on. Brother says, if you have any questions, inshallah, just put my name in front of it, just so I can quickly sift through these questions, inshallah, because some of the questions are directed to each other, because mashallah, you guys are having some interesting discussions as well. Some questions are being asked that some of you, mashallah, are trying to answer in the chat section. Something about comparison with Freud's understanding of the ego. I don't know, to be very honest. I haven't studied or looked into his conception of the ego. I'm just sharing with you the way I've understood it from what I've read and from a practical point of view. Because these things are very hard to pin down, and like I said, there are several definitions to these things. But I think it's interesting because when you unravel all of this, when you really unravel all of the things that you associate with, the way you define yourself, whether it's your degree, where you live, what family you belong to, what culture you come from, and all of when you unravel all of this type of identity, and you remove it for a second, realizing, well, that's what I've associated to myself, that's what's been given to me, that's how I've recognized myself here, that's how I've associated with this particular thing, and you unravel all of this, what's left? That's a really interesting idea. And this is something, by the way, New Age spiritualists speak about as well, a lot. I've seen this so much, that they refer to this this idea of the self, the you know, the true self, and finding peace through the true self, and unraveling all of this stuff that you carry around as baggage of self identity. What's left? That's key, you know. And it's an interesting experiment that you guys should try. You know, when you get a chance, sit down and really think about it. Who am I? And if you could start to undo all of the worldly associations, like, you know, I am so and so from this background, do this, blah 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 blah. What's left? And what you realize at the end of it all we are is a slave of Allah, a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, that's what we are really. And when you get to that point, that's when you can really start to, when you recognize that, I think that's where we can really start to move forward, you know, and change. But it has to, you have to really pin that down. And it could be difficult to do that while you have all of this, you know, this baggage that you're carrying around sometimes. Okay, let's see. Ron, please react to the last video of Ali Dawa. Okay, I'll check it out, inshallah. Hope you don't ask me to a negative reaction. May Allah bless Ali. He's a brilliant brother, mashallah. And he's really doing some amazing work, especially for the youth. Okay, guys, so what we can do, I think, inshallah, going to start to wrap up now, inshallah. What I'll do, inshallah, guys, is yeah, what I'll do, guys, is we'll do a Q&A, just a full-on Q&A, general Q&A, because normally I've been doing these lives with a topic, and then, you know, we get into that. So I'll do a general Q&A. I'll try to do it maybe some point tomorrow if I can, inshallah. But yeah, guys, inshallah, I just want to wrap up. I guess all I want to say is, it's all fine and well, you know, for people like on my side of the screen to do videos, and for you guys to watch these videos, etc. But all of this information that we learn, we share, we internalize, you know, anything we do on YouTube and any area of study, you know, it's all just information unless we start to change, you know, and start to really change in reality, you know, and it's something we all, many of us Muslims struggle with, where we have this identity, but we've been stale for a very long time. And what I mean by this is, you know, that we haven't moved as far as our growth is concerned of the true self, and, you know, of the character, because it's beautiful. Islam brings everything into alignment, you know. The character that develops or should develop through Islam, through the Quran, is the perfect character, and it's in line, or it facilitates for the growth of the inner self, the soul, for its purification. And like I said, it's the most beautiful blueprint. Allah's given us the most beautiful blueprint, you know, for life. It's the best self-help book that has ever existed and that would ever exist. But what we need to do is, instead of just hovering around the core, which we do in many cases, even as Muslims, hovering around, you know, doing bits and pieces, having that visual identity as a Muslim, brothers growing out the beard maybe, you know, sisters wearing the hijab, etc. And doing the basics, which alhamdulillah is very important, and they are the key, that we just hover around. We don't really, and we become stale. We think, okay, this is the bare minimum, I'm going to stop there. And if you become still, you will stagnate. You know, it's true of the world around you. I mean, there's signs of this in the world around you. When things become still, they stagnate and they rot. They rot. We don't want to be in that state, because you probably have noticed this in your life at some point yourselves. When you become stagnant in your deen and you stay on that plateau for, say, somewhat of an extended period of time, very soon you're not going to stay there. You're going to start to go back down gradually. You're going to start to degrade, rot, and we don't want that to happen. And because life isn't stationary. We're experiencing serial time. We're moving through this stage in this world, in this life, which is not the end. It's just a small part of reality. Reality in the greater sense of things. And while we're here, this life, we're moving. We're moving through serial time in one direction. So you can't become stagnant. We can't become stagnant with our deen. We can't become stagnant with anything in life. So we have to stop hovering and really start to implement Islam into our lives. And this is something, that our pious predecessors or scholars have mentioned over and over and over again, is to, gaining knowledge is brilliant. Keep gaining knowledge, keep learning. But if you don't manifest that practically in your life, and to start to live by it, and allow that to create real change in your own self, in your immediate life, you're going to stagnate and you're going to rot. And you don't want that to happen, because you won't be useful for yourself and you won't be useful for someone else. And going back to the point of responsibility, you're responsible. You're responsible for your own growth, and you're responsible for your own development, and you're responsible for your own purification in this life. And we have to take charge of that. We have to start to be responsible, brothers and sisters. Wallahi, we don't take responsibility. I used to shy away from responsibility so much. And then sometimes Allah will put things in your life which will force you to take up responsibility. You will be forced. And it's difficult if you haven't been training yourself. When you immediately are faced with a situation where you have to be responsible, you have to take responsible decisions, and you will have to take some difficult decisions in your life. And if you're not ready for it, it's going to be tough. So prepare yourself before you're put in a situation where you're forced to take up responsibility immediately. So and you're gonna do good for yourself, and you're gonna do good for the people around you. And inshallah, in the long run, you will be beneficial for the people around you in society and the world, inshallah. So I'll leave you guys with this. May Allah bless you. I will speak to you guys maybe next week. We'll see, inshallah. And yeah, assalamu alaikum. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.